The sand burned against Daeho's face as he pulled his cloth mask higher over his nose. The wasteland stretched in all directions, empty and dead. Nothing grew here anymore. Nothing lived here except him and the rats that somehow survived everything. He checked his water bottle. Half empty. That meant he had maybe 2 days before he would need to find more. The old cities sometimes had clean water deep in their ruins, but they were dangerous places. Too much radiation. Too many wild dogs that had gone mad from hunger. Daeho adjusted the heavy pack on his shoulders. Inside were the metal pieces he had found yesterday, good copper wire and some circuit boards that still worked. He could trade them at the next settlement for food and water. If he could find the next settlement. The Geiger counter on his belt clicked slowly. That was good. When it clicked fast, that meant death was close. He had learned that lesson years ago when the world ended. Back then, he had been a teacher at the university. He taught young people how to build machines and fix broken things. Now he used those same skills to stay alive in a world that wanted him dead. The wind grew stronger. Daeho looked up at the sky and cursed quietly. Dark clouds were moving in, fast. A sandstorm was coming and it looked like a big one. He needed shelter quickly. He ran across the flat ground looking for anything that could protect him from the storm. An old building, a cave, even a big rock would help. But there was nothing here. Just sand and more sand. The wind howled louder. Sand began to fill the air, making it hard to see. Daeho covered his eyes with his hands and kept running. He had survived too much to die in a stupid storm. Then he saw something strange. A hole in the ground. Not just any hole, but a perfect circle cut into the earth. It was deep and dark, but it would keep him safe from the storm. Daeho jumped into the hole just as the sandstorm hit with full force. Above him, the world turned into a wall of flying sand and screaming wind. He pressed himself against the wall of the hole and waited. The storm lasted for hours. When it finally stopped, Daeho climbed up to look around. The landscape had changed completely. The storm had blown away tons of sand, revealing things that had been buried for who knows how long. And then he saw it. At the bottom of what was now a much deeper crater, sat something impossible. A ship, but not like any ship he had ever seen. It was long and smooth, made of some kind of metal that seemed to glow with its own light. Strange symbols covered its surface, pulsing with soft blue energy. Daeho stared at the ship for a long time. His mind tried to make sense of what he was seeing. It was clearly not human. The design was too different, too advanced. But how could an alien ship be buried here on Earth? He climbed down into the crater carefully. The sand was still loose, from the storm, and he did not want to fall. As he got closer to the ship, his Geiger counter began to click faster. But it was not the bad kind of radiation he knew from the ruined cities. This was different. Cleaner somehow. The ship was huge, up close, maybe 200 meters long and 50 meters wide. Its surface was covered in those glowing symbols, and they seemed to respond to his presence. As he walked around the ship, the symbols grew brighter. Daeho found what looked like a door, though it was nothing like doors he knew. It was a smooth section of the hull with a circular pattern of symbols around it. When he touched the surface, his hand tingled with strange energy. The door began to open. Light poured out from inside the ship, not the harsh white light of human technology, but something warmer and more alive. The air that flowed out smelled clean and fresh, unlike anything Daeho had breathed in years. He looked into the ship and saw wonders beyond his imagination. The walls were covered with screens showing star maps and alien writing. Soft lights ran along the ceiling like rivers of energy. Everything was beautiful and strange, and obviously built by minds very different from human ones. Daeho stepped inside and the door closed behind him with a soft hiss. He was not afraid. After surviving the end of the world, very few things could scare him anymore. The corridor led deeper into the ship. He passed rooms filled with equipment he could not identify. Some of it looked like it might be weapons. Other devices seemed designed for science or exploration. All of it was far more advanced than anything humans had ever built. At the center of the ship, he found a large room filled with strange pods. They were made of clear material, and inside each one was a figure unlike anything he had ever seen. Not human, but not entirely alien either. They were tall and thin with long arms and legs. Their skin was gray-blue and their heads were larger than human heads. They were sleeping or dead, he could not tell which. One of the pods was different from the others. The figure inside looked more awake somehow. Its eyes were closed, but Daeho could see them moving beneath the lids like it was dreaming. Near the pods was a control panel covered with the same glowing symbols he had seen outside. Daeho had always been good with machines and computers. Even alien ones seemed to follow certain rules of logic and design. He studied the controls for a long time, trying to understand their pattern. Some symbols appeared more often than others. Some seemed to be connected to the life signs he could see on small screens next to each pod. Very carefully, he touched one of the symbols. The room filled with new sounds, humming and beeping and the soft whoosh of air moving through hidden vents. The sleeping figures in the pods began to stir. The one in the different pod opened its eyes and looked directly at Daeho. The alien had large, dark eyes that seemed to hold great intelligence and great sadness. It tried to speak, but no sound came out. Its lips moved, forming words in a language Daeho had never heard. Then the alien pressed its hand against the inside of the pod, and suddenly Daeho could understand its thoughts. Not words exactly, but meanings that appeared in his mind like memories that were not his own. The alien's name was Veltar. He was a captain of something called the Nixari Empire. His ship had crashed here long ago, while fleeing from enemies who wanted to destroy his entire species. They had gone into deep sleep, hoping to wake when it was safe to continue their journey. But something had gone wrong. They had slept too long, much too long. Through the mental connection, Daeho shared his own memories. He showed Veltar what had happened to Earth, the wars, the bombs, the long death of the world. He showed him how humans had nearly destroyed themselves and their planet. Veltar's emotions flowed through the connection. Surprise, horror, and something that might have been respect. This primitive world had somehow survived its own apocalypse. The species they had dismissed as simple animals had endured and adapted. Other pods began to open. More aliens woke from their long sleep, confused and afraid. They spoke to each other in their musical language, and Daeho could sense their growing understanding of how much time had passed. They had been asleep for 50,000 years. Their mighty empire was dust. Their enemies were probably dust too. And this dead world they had chosen as a temporary refuge was now their only home. But as Veltar looked at Daeho, the human who had awakened them, he began to wonder if perhaps this broken species might be more than they appeared. After all, they had survived the unthinkable, and in the distance, sensors that had been sleeping for 50,000 years began to detect something new in the darkness between the stars. Something that had been hunting for a very long time. Daeho watched as more of the alien pods opened with soft hissing sounds. 3 creatures emerged, moving slowly and carefully as they adjusted to being awake after such a long time. They were similar to Veltar, but each was different in small ways. The first alien was shorter than Veltar, with darker skin and quick nervous movements. Through the strange mental connection, Daeho learned her name was Zethra. She was Veltar's second in command, a navigator who had guided their ship across the galaxy. The second alien was broader and stronger looking, with hands that seemed designed for working with tools and machines. His name was Morkan, and he was the ship's engineer. He reminded Daeho of himself in some ways, always thinking about how things worked and how to fix them when they broke. The third alien was the oldest, with pale skin marked by strange scars. Her name was Lyra, and she had been their scientist and doctor. She moved carefully, as if the long sleep had been harder on her than the others. All 4 aliens gathered around Veltar as he shared what he had learned from Daeho's mind. They spoke in their musical language, but Daeho could sense their emotions through the mental link. Confusion, fear, and anger mixed together in a storm of feelings. Zethra was angry. She looked at Daeho with dark eyes full of disgust. In her mind, Humans were primitive creatures who had ruined their own world through stupidity and violence. How could such a species be trusted with anything important? Morkan was curious. He studied Deho with the same interest he might show a new machine. The human had managed to activate their ship's systems without any training. That suggested intelligence, even if it was a crude kind of intelligence. Lyra was sad. She had seen too much death in her long life, and learning about Earth's apocalypse reminded her of her own world's destruction. But she was also impressed that any species could survive what humans had survived. Veltar raised his hand for silence. When his crew stopped talking, he turned to Deho and spoke in heavily accented English. "You wake us," Veltar said slowly. "Your kind destroy world, but also survive. Why?" Deho thought about how to answer. "Because we had to," he said finally. "When everything is trying to kill you, you learn to be tough or you die. Most of us died, but some of us learned." Veltar translated this for the others. Zethra made a sound that might have been laughter, but it was not a kind sound. "This creature thinks survival makes them special," she said in English that was better than Veltar's. "Many species survive. Few are worth saving." "Maybe," Deho said, meeting her gaze. "But we're still here. Where's your empire now?" The question hit like a physical blow. All 4 aliens went silent, and Deho could feel waves of grief and loss through their mental connection. He immediately felt bad for saying it. "I'm sorry," he said. "That was cruel." Veltar shook his head slowly. "No, you speak truth. Nixari Empire is gone. We are last ones, maybe." Morkan moved to a control panel and began working with the ship's computers. Lights danced across screens as he searched for information about the galaxy they had left behind 50,000 years ago. After several minutes, he turned to the others and spoke rapidly in their language. Even without understanding the words, Deho could tell the news was bad from the way the aliens' shoulders sagged. "Dead," Veltar said quietly. "All dead. Nixari world's empty. Our enemies, also gone. War killed everyone." The silence that followed was heavy with sadness. These 4 beings were truly alone, the last survivors of an entire civilization. Deho understood that feeling better than most. "You're not alone," he said suddenly. "There are still humans alive. Not many, but some. We have settlements, communities. We help each other survive." Zethra snorted. "What could primitives offer us? You cannot even keep your own world alive." But Morkan looked interested. "Show us," he said to Deho. "Show us these survivors." Deho led them to one of the ship's viewing screens. With Morkan's help, he managed to activate the external sensors. The screen showed the wasteland outside, but also something else. Radio signals, faint but steady, coming from different directions. "There," Deho pointed. "That signal comes from the Seoul Underground. Myung Park leads about 2,000 people who live in the old subway tunnels. They've made a whole city, down there safe from radiation." He adjusted the controls, picking up another signal. "That one is from Tae-Jin Lee's group. They're nomads, warriors who move across the wasteland. They know how to fight and how to find resources others can't." A third signal appeared. "And that's from Sora Choi's research station. She's trying to find ways to clean up the radiation and make the land grow again. She's very smart." The aliens watched the signals with growing interest. Their ship's sensors could detect far more than Deho realized. They could see the settlements, count the people, analyze their technology. "Impressive," Lyra said quietly. "For primitives." But their conversation was interrupted by an alarm that began blaring throughout the ship. Red lights flashed, and symbols on the screens began changing rapidly. Morkan rushed to the control panel, his hands flying over the alien controls. He spoke urgently in their language, and Deho could feel fear radiating from all 4 aliens. "What is it?" Deho asked. Veltar's face was grim. "Sensors detect ships in deep space moving toward this system." "Human ships?" Deho asked, though he already knew the answer. "No, Korthak ships. The word sent a chill through Daeho even though he had never heard it before. Through the mental link, he could sense the alien's terror and hatred. Zethra spoke rapidly to Veltar, pointing at the screen and making sharp gestures. Daeho didn't need to understand her words to know what she was saying. They had to leave. Now. But Morkan shook his head and responded, with his own urgent words. Through the connection, Daeho understood the problem. Their ship was badly damaged from its long sleep. Many systems were not working. They could not leave yet. How long before they get here? Daeho asked. Veltar consulted the instruments. Perhaps 1 of your months, maybe less. And how long to fix your ship? Morkan and Veltar exchanged looks. With our technology, many months. But we do not have that time. Daeho studied the damage reports on the screen. Even though the alien writing was strange, the patterns made sense to him. Broken power systems, damaged hull sections, failed navigation computers. It was like looking at any complicated machine that had been neglected for too long. What if you had help? He asked. Zethra laughed harshly. What help could humans provide? You can barely keep simple machines working. But Daeho was already thinking, maybe we can't build ships like yours, but we know how to fix things with whatever we can find. We've been doing it for decades. He turned to Morkan. Show me your power systems. The alien engineer hesitated, then led Daeho deeper into the ship. They passed through corridors lined with damaged equipment and entered a large room filled with strange machinery. Daeho studied the alien technology with the same careful attention he had once given to human machines. Different materials, different design principles, but the underlying logic was similar. Power had to be generated, stored, and distributed. Damaged components had to be replaced or repaired. This conduit, he said, pointing to a twisted piece of metal. It's like a power cable, right? And this? He indicated a burned-out device. Power converter, Morkan said, sounding surprised. How do you? Same principles, Daeho said. Different execution. I can't build you new parts, but I might be able to jury-rig repairs with materials from the Wasteland. If your people are willing to try human methods. Veltar had followed them into the power room. He listened to their conversation with growing interest. You would help us? He asked Daeho. Even knowing we plan to abandon your world? Daeho shrugged. Where else are you going to go? Your empire is gone, your enemies are coming, this is your home now whether you like it or not. And if those Korthak things are as bad as you think they are, we're all in trouble together. Veltar was quiet for a long moment. Then he spoke to the others in their language. There was a brief argument with Zethra clearly objecting to something. But finally they seemed to reach an agreement. We will try, Veltar said. You will show us human methods. We will share Nexari knowledge. Together maybe we prepare for what comes. Daeho nodded. Then we better get started. And we'll need to contact the other settlements. If we're going to survive this, all of humanity needs to work together. As alarms continued to sound throughout the alien ship, Daeho began planning how to turn Earth's scattered survivors into an army capable of facing an enemy from the stars. The radio crackled to life in the alien ship's communication room. Daeho had spent 2 days learning how to connect the Nexari systems to Earth's old radio networks. It had taken patience from both him and Morkan, but finally they had made it work. This is Seoul Underground calling back, came a woman's voice through the static. Daeho Kim, is this really you? It's me, Mi Young, Daeho replied into the alien microphone. I know this sounds crazy, but I need you to listen carefully. Mi Young. Park's voice was full of disbelief as Daeho explained what he had found. An alien ship, survivors from an ancient empire, and enemies coming from space to destroy them all. He could almost see her shaking her head on the other end of the radio. Daeho, have you been drinking contaminated water? She asked. Because this sounds like radiation sickness talking. Put me on your main speakers, Daeho said. Let everyone hear this. There was a pause. Then Mi Young's voice returned. You're on speaker now. Everyone in Central Station is listening. Daeho took a deep breath. People of Seoul Underground, my name is Daeho Kim. Some of you remember me from before the collapse. I was a professor at Seoul National University. I've been living in the Wasteland for 15 years, and I found something that changes everything." He looked at Veltar, who nodded encouragingly. "We are not alone in the universe. There are other intelligent species, and some of them are coming to Earth, not as friends but as enemies who want to destroy us all." The radio filled with voices as people in the underground city began talking all at once. Mi-young had to shout, "For quiet." "But we also have allies," Daeho continued. "The survivors of a great empire who crash-landed on Earth long ago. They have technology beyond anything we've ever seen, and they're willing to share it with us. In exchange, we help them repair their ship and prepare to defend our world." "Prove it," Mi-young said simply. Veltar stepped up to the microphone. His English was still rough, but it was clear enough to understand. "Greetings, humans of Seoul Underground," he said in his strange accent. "I am Captain Veltar of the Nexari Empire. Your species impresses us with your survival skills. We offer knowledge and tools to help you fight the darkness that comes." The radio went completely silent. Daeho could imagine 2,000 people staring at their speakers in shock. Finally, Mi-young's voice came back, much quieter than before. That was not human." "No," Daeho said. "It wasn't. Mi-young, I need you to send a delegation up to the surface. Bring your best engineers and fighters. Bring medical supplies and any advanced equipment you have. This is not a joke or a trick. The survival of our entire species depends on what we do in the next few weeks." Similar conversations took place with the other human settlements. Taijin, Lee's nomadic warriors were easier to convince. They had seen too much strangeness in the wasteland to be completely surprised by aliens. Sora Choi's scientific community was the most skeptical, demanding proof and evidence before they would believe. That proof came when Morkan demonstrated Nexari technology over the radio. Using the ship's powerful transmitters, he sent detailed, technical specifications for a radiation detector that was far more advanced than anything humans had built. The scientists could build the device and test it themselves. Within a week, representatives from all 3 major human settlements had made the dangerous journey to the crash site. They came in small groups, traveling carefully through the wasteland to avoid the wild animals and radiation storms that still plagued the surface world. Mi-young Park arrived first, leading a group of 12 people from Seoul Underground. She was a small woman in her 40s with gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. Her people were pale from years of living underground, but they were tough and smart. "This is impossible," she whispered as she stood in the alien ship's main corridor, surrounded by technology beyond her wildest dreams. "Impossible things happen every day now," Daeho replied. "The question is what we do about it." Taejin Lee came next with 8 of his best warriors. He was a tall man with scars across his face and arms, marks from 15 years of fighting for survival in the wasteland. His people were dark from the sun and hard as iron, but their eyes went wide when they saw the alien ship. "How do we fight creatures who can build things like this?" he asked quietly. "By being smarter than they expect us to be," Daeho said, "and by having allies who know their weaknesses." Sora Choi was the last to arrive, bringing only 3 assistants but carrying more equipment than the other 2 groups combined. She was younger than the other leaders, maybe 35, with the intense focus of someone who had spent years solving impossible problems. "Show me everything," she demanded as soon as she saw the ship. "I want to understand how this technology works." The first meeting between all the human leaders and the 4 aliens was tense. Zethra still believed that humans were too primitive to be useful allies. She made her feelings clear through cold looks and sharp comments. "Your species destroyed its own world," she told Mi-young during one heated exchange. "Why should we trust you with ours?" Mi-young's response surprised everyone. "Because we survived our mistakes," she said calmly. "Did yours?" The comment hit hard, but it also broke some of the tension. Even Zethra had to respect the honesty of it. Over the following days, humans and aliens began working together. The process was not easy. The 2 species thought differently about almost everything. Humans were used to making quick decisions with limited information. The Nexari preferred careful planning and precise execution. But slowly they began to understand each other. Morkan showed human engineers how Nexari power systems worked. In return, human mechanics showed him how to repair complex equipment with whatever materials were available. "You use this?" Morkan asked in amazement as Tai Jin's people demonstrated how they had turned old car batteries and copper wire into a working radio network. "We use whatever works," one of the warriors replied. "Pretty is for people who have choices." The aliens were especially impressed by human adaptability. When a power coupling failed in one of their repair attempts, Sora immediately began building a replacement using parts salvaged from old computers and medical equipment. "Your people think like engineers even when you are not engineers," Lyra observed to Deho. "That is unusual." "When everything is broken, everyone learns to fix things," Deho replied. But their work was interrupted by another alarm from the ship's sensors. The Korthak fleet had accelerated. They would arrive in 3 weeks, not 4. Veltar called everyone together in the ship's main meeting room. Humans and aliens sat around a table that adjusted its shape to accommodate different body types while holographic displays showed star charts and tactical information. "The Korthak are hunters," Veltar explained. "They find worlds with intelligent life and consume everything. They have been chasing us for 50,000 years and now they have found us." "How many ships?" Taejin asked. He was already thinking. "Like a soldier. Our sensors detect 53 vessels of various sizes," Zethra replied. "Their largest ships carry thousands of warriors." The humans exchanged looks. The numbers were overwhelming. "What are their weaknesses?" Mi-young asked. "Practically. They think like a single mind," Lyra said. "All Korthak are connected by neural links. It makes them very coordinated but also predictable. They cannot adapt quickly to unexpected tactics." Sora leaned forward. "You're saying they don't handle surprises well?" "Correct. They expect enemies to fight in organized ways. When faced with chaos, they sometimes become confused." A slow smile spread across Taijin's scarred face. "Lady, you just described human specialty. We've been fighting chaotic battles for 15 years. But they have superior numbers and technology," Zethra pointed out coldly. "Numbers don't matter if you can't use them effectively," Mi-young said. "In the underground, we learned that a small force that knows the territory can defeat a much larger force that doesn't." Deho looked around the table at the faces of humans and aliens alike. They were scared and they had good reason to be. But he also saw something else in their expressions. Determination. Hope. "Then we make this our territory," he said. "We turn Earth into a trap. We use human guerrilla tactics with Nexari technology. We hit them in ways they don't expect, from directions they can't predict." "You speak of warfare against a force that has conquered hundreds of worlds," Veltar warned. "Yeah," Deho replied. "But they never conquered a world where the natives had already survived the apocalypse. We've been living in hell for 15 years. Maybe it's time we showed some aliens what that teaches you." As if responding to his words, the ship's sensors detected another change in the approaching fleet. The Korthak had accelerated again. They would be here in 2 weeks. Time was running out, but for the first time since awakening the aliens, Deho felt genuinely hopeful. Humanity had survived the end of their world through cooperation, creativity, and sheer stubborn refusal to give up. Now they would find out if those same qualities could help them survive the beginning of a war. The sky darkened as 53 alien warships dropped out of hyperspace above Earth. Each ship was massive, black as space itself, covered in spikes and weapon ports that glowed with deadly energy. They hung in the sky like metal vultures, blotting out the sun. Deho stood on a ridge overlooking the crash site, watching the enemy fleet through Nexari binoculars. The ships were even more terrifying in person than they had appeared on the displays. He could feel fear trying to crawl up his spine, but he pushed it down. There was no room for fear now. "Korthak dropships launching." Morkan's voice crackled through the radio. "First wave incoming." The plan they had developed was desperate and probably insane. It relied on everything going exactly right, and Deho had lived long enough to know that things rarely went exactly right. But it was the only plan they had. The human settlements had been evacuating for days. Mi Young's people had gone deeper into the subway tunnels, turning the underground city into a fortress. They had hidden weapons and supplies throughout the tunnel system, creating a maze that would confuse and trap any invaders. Taejin's warriors had spread across the wasteland, setting up ambush points and supply caches. They knew every hill, every ruin, every place where a small force could hide and strike at a larger one. They had done it against human enemies for years. Now they would try it against aliens. Sora's scientists had worked around the clock to turn Earth's deadliest feature into a weapon. The radiation that had poisoned their world could also poison their enemies. They had created bombs filled with the most contaminated material they could find, designed to spread radioactive death across wide areas. The aliens had done their part too. Veltar had shared Nexari military knowledge, teaching humans how to fight a technologically superior enemy. Lyra had provided medical information about Korthak biology, revealing weak points that could be exploited. Zethra had used the ship's sensors to map the enemy fleet and identify priority targets. But Morkan's contribution might be the most important of all. Working day and night, he had managed to repair enough of their ship's systems to make it functional. Not fully operational, but good enough for one final flight. First dropships landing in Sector 7. Taejin's voice came over the radio. Engaging now. Daeho could see explosions in the distance as the nomad warriors attacked the Korthak landing parties. Through his binoculars, he watched alien soldiers pour out of their ships. They were larger than humans, covered in dark armor that made them look like metal insects. They moved with perfect coordination, like parts of a single machine. But Taejin's people didn't fight them like a machine. They hid and ran using hidden tunnels and camouflage positions. They would fire a few shots, kill some enemies, then disappear before the Korthak could organize a response. They're confused, Veltar's voice said with surprise over the radio. The Korthak are requesting new orders from their command ship. They do not understand why the humans will not fight properly. Keep them confused, Daeho replied. Mi Young, what's your status? Underground is secure, came Mi Young's voice. We've sealed most of the entrances but left a few open with nasty surprises waiting. Let them try to chase us down here. The HFY battle raged for hours. The Korthak had expected to find a dead world with a few hiding aliens. Instead, they found a species that fought like demons and refused to stay dead. Every time they cleared an area, humans would emerge from tunnels or ruins they hadn't known existed. Every building might hide snipers or bombs. Every piece of seemingly abandoned equipment might explode when they got close. Second wave dropships launching, Morkan reported. They're sending more troops. Good, Daeho said. The more they send down, the fewer they have guarding their ships. That was the key to their plan. The Korthak were used to overwhelming resistance with sheer numbers. They would keep sending more and more troops to the surface until they had achieved total victory. But every soldier they sent down was one less soldier protecting their fleet. As the day wore on, reports kept coming in over the radio. The humans were taking casualties, but they were giving better than they got. More importantly, they were learning how to fight their new enemy. Korthak armor is tough, but the joints are vulnerable, one of Taejin's warriors reported. Aim for the knees and elbows. Their weapons are powerful but slow to recharge, another voice added. You can get close during the reload time. They don't like underground fighting. Mi Young's voice was tight with exhaustion but victorious. We collapsed 3 tunnels on them. They hate enclosed spaces. But the Korthak were learning too. By evening, they had figured out some of the humans' tactics. They began using flying drones to scout ahead, making ambushes harder. They started sealing tunnel entrances behind them, preventing escape. Their coordination improved as their commanders adapted to human unpredictability. We're losing ground, Taejin reported grimly. They're pushing us back on all fronts. Daeho looked up at the enemy fleet hanging in the sky above them. It was time for the most dangerous part of their plan. Veltar, is your ship ready? As ready as we can make it, the alien captain replied. Power is at 60%. Weapons are functional. We have perhaps 1 hour of combat capability. Then let's go end this. The Nexari ship rose from the crater where it had been hidden for 50,000 years. Its hull gleamed in the fading sunlight, and its weapons powered up with deadly energy. After so long sleeping, it was finally awake and angry. The Korthak fleet reacted instantly. Ships began turning toward the new threat, their weapons charging with bright flashes of light. But they had made a crucial mistake. They had sent too many of their fighters and troops to the surface. The fleet was undermanned and unprepared for a direct attack. Targeting their command ship, Zethra announced from the navigation station. "All weapons ready," Morkan confirmed from engineering. Veltar looked at Deho, who had insisted on being on the bridge for this moment. "Your plan, human. Give the order." "Fire everything," Deho said. The Nexari ship unleashed its fury on the Korthak fleet. Energy beams and missiles struck the enemy command ship, overwhelming its shields and tearing holes in its hull. Explosions bloomed across its surface as critical systems failed. But the victory came at a price. The other Korthak ships returned fire with everything they had. The Nexari ship's shields flared and sparked under the assault. "Shields at 30%, Morkan shouted over the alarms. "Hull breach on deck 4, Lyra reported. The ship shuddered as more weapons struck it. But Deho wasn't finished yet. "Ramming speed," he ordered. "What?" Veltar stared at him in shock. "We can't win a straight fight," Deho explained. "But we can take their command ship with us. Without central coordination, the Korthak hive mind will collapse into chaos." Veltar understood immediately. He spoke quickly to his crew in their own language, then turned back to Deho. "This will likely kill us all." "Yeah," Deho said calmly, "but it'll kill them too. And our people will survive." The alien captain was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well. If this is how the last Nexari die, let it be a death worth remembering." The ship accelerated toward the massive Korthak command vessel. Enemy fire poured into them, but they kept coming. Alarms screamed throughout the ship as systems failed one by one. "Brace for impact," Veltar shouted. The Nexari ship struck the Korthak command vessel like a spear thrown by an angry god. Both ships exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the sky brighter than the sun. On the surface below, humans and Korthak alike stopped fighting to stare up at the destruction. The blast wave knocked everyone flat, and pieces of burning metal rained down like deadly snow. But in the underground tunnels and hidden bunkers, people picked themselves up and checked their radios. "This is me young in Seoul Underground. Anyone alive out there? Taijin here. Most of my people are okay. What just happened?" Sora reporting from Research Station 3. "Our sensors detected a massive explosion in orbit. The alien fleet is breaking formation." They look confused. Without their command ship and the central intelligence that coordinated their actions, the Korthak fleet began to fall apart. Individual captains made different decisions, pulling in different directions. Some ships tried to continue the attack. Others began retreating toward deep space. A few simply sat motionless as if their crews didn't know what to do without orders. The ground forces were even more affected. Cut off from the hive mind that had guided them, Korthak soldiers wandered aimlessly or fought each other in confusion. Human fighters emerged from hiding to finish off the scattered enemies. As dawn broke over the battlefield, it became clear that the impossible had happened. Earth survivors had defeated an invasion force that had conquered hundreds of worlds. The victory had cost them dearly. The Nexari ship was gone, taking with it 4 beings who had lived for thousands of years. Many human fighters had died defending their world. The surface was more damaged than ever, covered with the wreckage of alien ships and the bodies of invaders. But they had won. Against all odds, the broken remnants of humanity had stood up to an enemy from the stars and emerged victorious. In Diu, the ruins of the battlefield, Deho's radio crackled one last time. Somehow, impossibly, Veltar's voice came through the static. "Human Deho, are you alive?" "Veltar, how are you?" 1 year later, Deho stood on the observation deck of humanity's first starship and watched Earth grow smaller in the viewing window. The planet still looked wounded from space, with brown patches where the radiation was thickest and gray clouds that never seemed to clear completely. But there were also new lights scattered across the dark continents, signs of settlements growing and connecting with each other. It's beautiful, Lyra said softly beside him. The Nexari scientist had become something of an expert on human psychology during the past year, and she understood why leaving home was both exciting and painful. It's getting better, Deho replied. Slowly, but better. The ship around them was a marvel of cooperation between two species. The basic design was Nexari, but human modifications were everywhere. Redundant systems that could be repaired with spare parts. Flexible equipment that could be adapted for multiple purposes. Simple controls that any human could learn to operate. They called it the New Dawn, and it represented everything both species had learned from their unlikely alliance. Captain Deho to the bridge, came Mi Young's voice over the ship's communication system. We're ready for the hyperspace jump. Deho smiled at the title. The human leaders had insisted he should command their first interstellar mission, even though Veltar knew far more about space travel. The human who woke us should be the one to lead us to the stars, the Nexari captain had argued. The bridge was a busy place, with humans and aliens working side by side at control stations. Mi Young. Park served as the ship's administrator, managing the complex logistics of their mission. Taejin Lee commanded the security forces, a mix of human warriors and Nexari soldiers who had learned to respect each other's different fighting styles. Sora Choi ran the science department, constantly amazed by the new technologies she could study. Her teams were already working on improvements to both human and Nexari designs, creating hybrid systems that were better than either species had developed alone. The 4 original Nexari had found new purposes in this strange new world. Veltar served as Deho's advisor on interstellar politics and military strategy. Zethra had become the ship's navigator, though she still made sharp comments about human inefficiency. Morkan worked with human engineers, teaching them advanced techniques while learning their practical problem-solving methods. All stations report ready, Mi Young announced as Deho took his seat in the captain's chair. Hyperspace calculations confirmed, Zethra added. Course set for the Kepler system. Their destination was a star system 40 light-years from Earth, where long-range sensors had detected signs of possible intelligent life. It would be humanity's first contact with aliens other than the Nexari, and everyone was both excited and nervous about what they might find. Engineering reports all systems green, called out Jinwoo, one of Morkan's human apprentices. He was young, barely 25, but he had learned to work with alien technology faster than anyone expected. Security teams are ready, Taejin reported. Both human and Nexari squads are prepared for any situation. Deho looked around the bridge at the faces of his crew. Humans and aliens, scientists and soldiers, all working together toward a common goal. A year ago, most of these people had never imagined that other intelligent species even existed. Now they were preparing to travel between the stars. Science department standing by, Sora said from her station. All sensors active and recording. Whatever we find out there, we'll be ready to study it. The transformation of Earth survivors had been remarkable to watch. The same determination that had kept them alive in the Wasteland now drove them to master technologies beyond their wildest dreams. They learned to operate Nexari computers, repair alien machinery, and even pilot small spacecraft. But they had also taught the Nexari valuable lessons in return. The aliens had been amazed by human adaptability and resourcefulness. They had learned to think more flexibly, to find solutions when perfect answers weren't available, to work with whatever materials they could find. Initiating hyperspace sequence, Zethra announced. Jump in 30 seconds. Through the viewing window, Deho could see other ships preparing for the journey. The New Dawn was the largest, but it wasn't traveling alone. A small fleet of mixed human Nexari vessels followed behind, each one carrying explorers, scientists, and representatives of both species. Back on Earth, more ships were being built in orbital shipyards constructed from salvaged Korthak technology. The enemy's defeat had provided humanity with resources and knowledge they never could have developed on their own. Weapons had been turned into tools. Warships had become construction platforms, and invasion equipment had been repurposed for exploration. The surface settlements were growing too. Mi Young's underground cities were expanding upward, with new communities emerging in the safer areas. Taijin's nomadic tribes were becoming trading networks that connected settlements across vast distances. Sora's research stations were developing new technologies to clean up the radiation and restore the damaged ecosystem. 10 seconds to jump, Zethra called out. Deho thought about the message he had recorded for the people of Earth before they departed. He had tried to explain what this mission meant, not just for the crews who were making the journey, but for everyone who would remain behind. We're not running away from our home, he had said. We're expanding what home means. Every world we explore, every species we meet, every discovery we make will benefit all of humanity. The Wasteland taught us to survive. Now the stars will teach us to thrive. Jump initiated, Zethra announced. The stars outside the viewing window suddenly stretched into lines of light, then disappeared entirely as the ship entered the strange space between dimensions that allowed faster-than-light travel. For a few moments there was nothing but swirling colors and impossible geometries that hurt to look at directly. Then, just as suddenly, normal space returned. But the stars were different now, arranged in patterns that no human had ever seen from Earth. They had crossed 40 light-years in an instant, traveling farther from home than anyone in their species' history. Jump successful, Zethra reported. All systems functioning normally. Sensors are detecting multiple planets in the system, Sora announced excitedly. At least 3 of them are in the habitable zone, and there are artificial structures around the 4th planet. Artificial? Deho asked. Orbital platforms, communication arrays, maybe shipbuilding facilities. Definitely signs of advanced technology. Through the viewing window, they could see their destination star growing larger as the ship moved deeper into the system. It was slightly smaller and redder than Earth's sun, but it looked warm and welcoming after the cold void of hyperspace. Captain, Mi-young said quietly, we're receiving radio transmissions from the 4th planet. They're not human or Nexari, but they're definitely artificial. Any idea what they're saying? Not yet, but our translation computers are working on it. Give us a few hours and we should be able to establish basic communication. Beltar moved up beside Deho's chair. This is how it begins, the Nexari captain said softly. One contact leads to another and another. Soon you will know of dozens of species, hundreds of worlds. The galaxy is much larger and stranger than you can imagine. Good, Deho replied. We've gotten pretty good at dealing with large and strange things. The alien laughed, a sound that still seemed odd coming from his throat but had become familiar over the past year. Yes, I believe you have. As the hours passed, the translation computers began to make sense of the alien transmissions. The species they were approaching called themselves the Talamari, and they seemed to be peaceful traders who had been exploring this region of the galaxy for centuries. More importantly, they were curious about the new arrivals. The combination of human and Nexari technology broadcasting from the same ships had caught their attention. They wanted to know how 2 such different species had learned to work together. Captain, Sora called out, I'm reading massive energy, signatures from the edge of the system. Multiple ships are coming out of hyperspace. For a moment, everyone tensed. Were these more enemies, drawn by the disturbance of their arrival? But Zethra's sensors told a different story. The ships are broadcasting Talamari identification codes. It appears to be a diplomatic fleet, not a military one. They're here to meet us, Mi-young said with wonder. Our first official contact with an alien species. Deho stood up from his captain's chair and looked around at his crew. Human faces and Nexari features alike showed the same expression of excitement and anticipation. Well, he said, I guess we better make a good first impression. Hours later, representatives from 3 different species sat around a conference table aboard the New Dawn. The Talamari were tall and graceful, with skin that shifted color depending on their emotions and large eyes that seemed to see everything. Their leader, Ambassador Kethra, spoke through a translation device that turned her musical language into English and Nexari. We have heard legends of humans, she said, but we thought they were myths. Stories told of a species that survived the destruction of their own world and then defeated the Korthak Empire in a single battle. The stories are true, Veltar replied, though they make it sound more glorious than it was. We were all terrified most of the time.